Yo, 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 top of the morning. Welcome to EP1. Today, in this first episode, I'm gonna give y'all a quick ride. I'm gonna talk about my Wing Chun, how I got here. I'm gonna say a little bit about some MMA, and I'm gonna say a little bit about some Bruce Lee. But first, let's kick it. I'm gonna talk about my story. So yeah, come on in, settle down, get comfortable. Everybody else, all we did was watch Kung Fu movies. We got to know Bruce Lee very well. So, watching Kung Fu movies, from my perspective as a kid, I used to be like, man, yeah, these motherfuckers, they dope, you know. If they could do it, I could do it. So, Bruce Lee would be in magazines. You pick up a magazine, you read the magazine, and Bruce Lee would start talking about his techniques and how he learned things. And later on down the line, you understand Bruce Lee's story. But one of the things that he said that resonated with me was look at all other martial arts and take what's useful and discard the rest. So that's how I started learning things. I didn't just look at one martial art. I looked at everything that was available. I used to buy the Black Belt magazine. I used to read everything in the magazines. I had enough of those magazines to fill up an apartment. But, what I did learn was one thing Bruce Lee said was, it's like 10,000 reps to master anything. And, he would, tell you techniques and how to punch. And, one thing he said, he was like, you know, when you first think about a punch is just a punch. But when you go into detail about this punch, you realize that there's a whole lot that goes into a punch. Short range power, the punch, the way your fist is. And when you go through all this and you start learning and you start practicing and repping and, 10,000 reps to master anything, you realize, like I say, there's a lot that go into punching. So, I spent the time, as another general rule in martial arts is to know thyself, to know what you're capable of, what you can do and what you can't do, and what your limits are. So I started probably at the age of 9. I was always kicking things, punching things, learning what Bruce Lee said in the magazine. I wanted to learn martial arts. That was the beginning of my obsession with it. Um, so yeah, I would practice punching, not just my left hand, but both hands, punching and kicking, all type of kicks, whatever I was comfortable with, because I wanted to be efficient. I didn't want to have to raise my foot up above my head and do the splits, and I just wanted it to be natural. Later on down the line, when I realized that I was on my way to um, getting to Wing Chun and loving Wing Chun, because it's the simplicity of how your body moves. They call it lazy man kung fu, because you don't have to do the splits. You don't have to do all that crazy thing that a lot of other martial arts have to do. So Wing Chun is built off of your natural abilities. So as I grew up with that, I always practice. I learned to box. You grow up in the streets, in the hood, or whatever. You're gonna learn to fight. People are always testing you. So you can do a lot of slap boxing. Slap boxing is that's a hood thing. I don't know how, yeah, big city, hood thing, a lot of slap boxing. Mm. So, like I said, in the streets, you get into a lot of fights. And if you're hanging out in the streets, you get into more fights. So boxing was one of the first things that I loved doing. I realized that because I was left-handed, I had an advantage over people. So I used that advantage and fell in love with boxing. Over time, studied other things like how kicks were kicks were done. What's the most efficient way of kicking? My whole methodology of learning martial arts was, what's the most efficient way to do things? What's the most efficient punch? What's the most efficient kick? What's the most devastating punch, devastating kick, how to really put somebody down. Eventually, going through that, I eventually went to the Navy, went to war, went to the first Persian Gulf War, saw some things, done some things, being around very tough-minded people taught me some things about, resilience. But while I was in the Navy, I met this white guy. I can't even remember his name right now, but he had went out for the SEAL program. Somehow he rung out. He came back to the ship, but he was the first guy that introduced me to Wing Chun. Because one time we was talking about Bruce Lee and martial arts, and he started showing me some stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, this is Wing Chun right here," So he eventually taught me the Sulam Tao. So that's why I learned the Sulam Tao while we was out on deployment. So that was the spark right there for me to look into Wing Chun. After that, after I got out the Navy, I read more books on the subject, articles, videos. I ended up getting some private instructions along the way from different people that I would find them on Craigslist. I would learn certain things, the structure, stands. I even learned the Chi Sao. Some time went by. I always practiced martial arts. I probably practiced martial arts so much, but a lot of people didn't know it because it's something that I did in secret. But as I grew up and I went into security work was like a natural for me. You like fighting, security. Yeah, all right. So I did bouncer jobs. Within those bouncer jobs and security jobs and driver jobs, you realize that this Wing Chun comes in handy, being efficient, knowing how to defend yourself and not get in these long, drawn out brawls with people. So on to the next. I started learning Chen Na, or joint locks, fundamental hand techniques, because you can, first level of Wing Chun, you can be out there fighting with people all the time, but that's pretty much the hard version of, you being destructive and you hurting people. But it comes times that you realize that, doing security work, there are cameras everywhere, and you just can't be beating up people and hurting people over the slightest, altercation. So I wanted to learn how to deal with people and not have to hurt people all the time. So that's when learning Chen Na came in control. That brought in the soft control, because Wing Chun is balance. It's hard and soft. A lot of people, they just learn the hard side without ever getting to the soft side, but it's balanced. It's levels to this. Every time you go up one mountain, there's a whole nother mountain. There's a whole another thing to learn. Bruce Lee and his antagonist, Wong Jackman, to me, those were probably the first guys who were the first, they grandfathered MMA in, because those guys, they studied different styles and they made themselves from different styles. When Bruce Lee stopped training Wing Chun, when he left China and came to America to continue his training and learning, he just studied other styles and figured out what was the best way for him. Like his Jeet Kune Do. That is pretty much Bruce Lee's version of his Wing Chun, which is why a lot of people aren't good at Jeet Kune Do, because you don't have Bruce Lee's natural abilities, his natural quickness, his natural flexibility. So like I say, Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's Wing Chun, and I can look back at that now, because at my age, You know, I'm older than Bruce Lee now. So when Bruce Lee died, he was 32. At that time, Bruce Lee didn't develop Pung. That's a high level skill, and he wasn't there yet. Bruce Lee was so good that he kicked your ass with just hands and feet, and he was lightning with it. So that tell you something about the man. You know, they wondered, you know, if Bruce Lee was good or if he could fight because he didn't get in the MMA ring and UFC rings. Bruce Lee would have devastated anybody they put him up against with just hands and feet, and he didn't have to use his knees, elbows, or nothing else. Really think about that. Look at John Bones. He the king right now in his division by using one Wing Chun kick. And people are gonna say, well, that's not like necessarily a Wing Chun thing. Yeah, it's a universal technique. Wing Chun uses universal guidelines and principles and concepts for most other arts. So it's not unique to Wing Chun. Wing Chun is just known for crossed up kicks and the simplicity of it. And for all those people who say, well, you know, Wing Chun would suffer in MMA, well, yeah, probably would, because you're trying to put gloves on a tiger just so you can fight with the tiger. Take the gloves off, sign a death waiver, medical waiver, and let's see how some of these MMA guys would do. Yeah, probably wouldn't last. So, where was I? See, the MMA guys, you know, when you in that ring, you know, you're not worried about losing your life. You're not worried about getting hurt too much because they got a lot of rules, you know. If I were to go in the ring, they would be like, yeah, no wrenching necks, no poking eyes, no chopping throats, no hitting below the belt. That's what we specialize in, being destructive. So, yeah, the things that we do well, they don't allow us to do. Because I'd be able to go in there and within 10 seconds shut it down. So, and also, them guys, they get to watch tape of you. You know, they're prepared for you. On the streets, it's a totally different thing. You don't know who you up against. You don't know if they got weapons. And on the streets, it's instant violence. You know, where you're in a bar, you in the alleyway, you out on the streets. With people trying to knock the fat off your head. They trying to carve you up. They trying to put you out. It's a whole different scenario. You know, when your life is on the line, most people aren't prepared for that type of can you get over the fight or flight reflex. Most people, like I say, take them out of their ring and put them in a situation where their life depended on it. They might not even have it in them to put up enough of a fight. Because after you've been through a whole lot of fights, it takes time to get over that. You know, you can lose 60% of your energy just being in that situation where you got to fight for your life. Imagine trying to fight and you feel like you're losing energy. Yeah, that's not a good feeling. But once you overcome it, you get used to it. You know, if you ever seen this movie called Knockaround Guys with Vin Diesel, there's a scene in the bar where Vin Diesel talk about 500 fights. Yeah, after you've been through enough fights, you're going to learn some things that you're just not going to learn through training or being coached by somebody, because they can't teach it if they haven't lived that violent life. So, yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking that you have to get used to. Also, you know, there's levels to Wing Chun. Most of the time, you guys just see the punching and the striking aspect of Wing Chun, and you think that's what it is. Oh, just the chain punching and then walking out with their hands out. When you see that, those are beginners. They don't know enough yet. When you start going up the level, your Wing Chun becomes, you have more punk. You're able to manipulate. You're learning to do tricks. Like anything, you learn the beginning, you learn the basics, you become intermediate, you become advanced. When you become advanced, you get into that trick stage. For example, when you ride a bike, at first you didn't know how. You had to get coordinated, you have to learn. If you kept riding, then you learn to ride fast. Then you learn to pop wheelies. When you start popping wheelies, now you enter the trick stage. Now you're doing flips and twirls and riding on the handlebars, and you know, same thing applies to everything else. When you get in the trick stage, that's when the magic happens. You start learning in this martial arts, you start learning joint locks. Joint locks change the whole perspective of things. You don't have to be so fast and so lightning anymore. You start learning that Kung Fu is about precision. If I'm precise, it looks like lightning. When you start rising up the levels, when your Kung Fu get to the point of being at the point of contact, that's almost the highest level of getting to physical martial arts, besides going into Qigong and Qi and pressure points, and highest level is Pung and Jin, silk reeling. In Tai Chi they call it silk reeling, being able to manipulate your opponent's energy. So I want to end this with, as you get to a higher level of Kung Fu, Wing Chun, you get to be able to control people at the point of contact. As soon as I touch you, I feel like I got you. Because no matter where I touch you at, I'm taking your balance. No matter you throw a punch, you throw a jab, you kick, anything, as soon as I touch it, I'm manipulating your balance. So I'm gonna leave by saying this. If I got you fighting for your balance, you can't be fighting me. Really think about that. And then we'll talk about this Wing Chun at another time. So those that wanted to know who I am, this is the beginning. This is the eye opener. And I'm letting y'all know I'm the next man up. And here I come.